It has been over 24 hours now since the Baltimore Ravens fell to the Cincinnati Bengals 31-28, coupled along with the Buffalo Bills defeating the Miami Dolphins and the Tennessee Titans beating the Jacksonville Jaguars, officially eliminating the Ravens from the playoffs for now the fourth time in 5 seasons. Welcome into a very somber, very depressing, very angry edition of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Whatever negative emotion you want to call it, that's pretty much been the feeling that all Baltimore sports fans have collectively shared over the past 24 hours in what quite honestly might be the worst regular season defeat in franchise history. Not only was it the fourth time in 5 years that the Ravens officially eliminated from the playoffs, but they did it to themselves, and they did it to themselves in front of a half-empty stadium. It's pretty amazing to think where this franchise was just a couple years ago and to where it is now, and I find myself asking the question, and I'm sure a lot of you are, what happened? What the hell happened last night? What the hell's happened the past 4 or 5 seasons when this team's been completely mediocre? I mean, if you had told me after the Ravens won Super Bowl 47, after they had made the playoffs 5 years in a row, that they would then go 5 years missing the playoffs, 80% of that span, I'd have called you crazy. I would have never believed it, but that's where the team is, and there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. Congratulations to the Buffalo Bills, by the way, for making the playoffs for the first time in almost 2 decades. I have a couple Bills fans that I'm friends with at Bloomsburg. Some I'm close with, some not so much, but it is going to be really cool to see the Bills in the playoffs for the first time, and just seeing the reaction from my friends and from Bills Mafia on social media, just seeing the videos going viral of the fans and the team celebrating. It honestly doesn't get any better than that, and I know that a lot of Ravens fans are sad and angry that the Bills are in the playoffs and they're not, but let's just be happy for them. It's been a long-suffering franchise. I know that they had a hand in the Ravens not making the playoffs, but the Ravens are not in the playoffs because of the Baltimore Ravens, not because of the Buffalo Bills. So anyway, kind of off the grid there, but this is going to be a completely unscripted version of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, non-edited, just a raw reaction piece, 24 hours now, since probably one of the worst losses in franchise history, just a soul-crushing defeat at a frigid, cold M&T Bank Stadium. I was one of the fans in attendance that decided to show up on New Year's Eve with my staff writer, one of our staff writers, Charm City Birdwatch, Nolan McGraw. But again, just a horrible, horrible loss for the Baltimore Ravens, and now we turn the page to the playoffs, and shortly after that, another offseason full of uncertainty, a lot of potential change looming. But before we dive into that, before we really talk about what needs to be done, I'm your host, Jake McDonnell. You can follow me on Twitter at JMcDonnell95, as well as Facebook.com/JMcDonnell95. You're listening to the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, which is coming to you through iTunes or SoundCloud. You can check us out at CharmCityBirdwatch.com, as well as CharmCityBW on Twitter. You know, it's funny, a couple weeks ago, while the Philadelphia Eagles were going through some of their, the injury to Carson Wentz, you know, me having a lot of relationships with Eagles fans, listening to a lot of the talk shows, a lot of the podcasts that my friends do, just sounding completely defeated, and how ironic, that's exactly how I feel right now. I know some of you listening to this, hearing that's probably going to make you smile. I do, you know, it's no doubt that I do like to talk a lot. I think a lot of what I say is warranted. I don't think I'm eating my own words by any stretch of the imagination, that I find myself here with the Ravens losing yesterday, coupled along with 2 other teams that we didn't want to win, winning to get in the playoffs. But if you remember last week, I had very, how do I put this? I was very uncertain about this game. It was very well chronicled, the stuff that I put in the in my previews, and I talked about it on Ebony Bird as well on the podcast last week. But I didn't have a good feeling about this game. The Ravens always don't play well against the Bengals in the John Harbaugh, Joe Flacco era. I think the Bengals, they're a division rival, but Flacco has historically struggled against the Bengals. The Ravens going into Sunday were 3-7 in their last 10 games against Cincinnati. And we've seen the Bengals a lot, not just in Week 17, but earlier in the season where the Ravens would just fall flat against the Bengals, and give credit to the Ravens for limiting A.J. Green, which was a big point of emphasis due to what A.J. Green's done to the Ravens in the past, but we had that 49-yard Tyler Boyd touchdown at the end of the game with 44 seconds left that eliminated the Ravens from the playoffs, and I'm at a complete loss for words. I can't say that I was shocked that they lost. I was shocked that both the Titans and the Bills won, combined with the Ravens losing. All the pundits said that there was a 90% plus chance that none of that would happen and the Ravens would be in the playoffs, but yet here we are after one of the biggest choke jobs in franchise history, and this one's going to sting for a long time. I laid in bed last night, I'll be honest. I didn't really do much. I went to the game with Nolan. We sat there in the freezing cold. I had 25 layers of clothing on, as well as my Ravens comforter over me, freezing. I actually made it through the game okay. I had a scarf covering my face. I made it through the game all right. Of course, getting a little cranky on the light rail coming back. It took a long time, coupled along with the monumental defeat. That's to be expected, but it was New Year's Eve. I'll be honest. I came home, I got a shower, and said to hell with it and went to bed. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. I wasn't in the mood to see anybody. I was just in the mood to lay there and think about that fourth down play for a good hour or so before I fell asleep. That sounds exactly depressing, and that's exactly what it is, because it's exactly how we feel right now, all in Baltimore. There's no sugarcoating that this loss is going to impact the franchise potentially for years to come. This is the type of loss that brings about change, and whether or not that's going to happen, I honestly have no idea. There are a lot of Ravens fans that are clamoring for John Harbaugh's head. Dean Pease is retired, the defensive coordinator. A lot of people want Morningweg gone, and all of that's warranted. They've missed the playoffs 4 out of 5 seasons. In any other city in the NFL, any other franchise, that would be more than for it to be it for a head coach to lose his job. But we all know that there is a string of repetitiveness, a string of loyalty, consistency. The Ravens always preach that that's what they're built upon, and will they continue to go the same route that they have without making any changes to their coaching staff? I have no idea. If I was Steve Bisciotti, I'd probably fire John Harbaugh, just for the fact that they haven't made the playoffs 4 out of 5 years. We've lost to Pittsburgh 3 times in a row. We just lost basically a playoff game, a must-win game at home to the Bengals! This wasn't Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger that we lost to. This wasn't a road game we lost. This was a loss to a 5-10, 6-9, whatever they were, Bengals team in your home stadium in front of a half-empty crowd. And that's a whole other topic that's going to be a big talking point throughout the offseason, is what the hell are the Ravens going to do about the empty seats? I mean, fans are clearly upset about the protest. They're upset about the product on the field, and I think last night was a perfect example of why we're frustrated. And it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay. We're not in the playoffs. The Ravens failed again. The Ravens' offense was completely inept in the first half, like we've seen so many times, but they got it together in the second half. Let's give them credit for that. But what happened when we got a lead finally? When we finally had a lead for the first time in a game? The defense blew it, and the defense was great this year. They led the NFL in takeaways. They were in the top half of the stats. They were up there. They were supposed to be one of the best units in the NFL. Didn't end up living to that, but they were a very good defense. Let's not fault them. If it hadn't been for the defense, the Ravens would not be in the playoff position they were then. But let's take a look at since the Ravens have won the Super Bowl, let's take a look at some key drives here. And I do have some notes for this podcast. I did some research, but I'm going off completely unscripted. Game-winning drives for opponents since winning the Super Bowl in the clutch. 2014 divisional round versus New England. The Patriots went on a 10-play, 74-yard drive, capped off with a 23-yard touchdown pass from Tom Brady to Brandon LaFell with 5:13 left in the game. Flacco would throw an interception on the next drive, therefore pretty much ending it with 2 minutes left. The Patriots ran the clock out. Going fast forward to Christmas Day last year against the Steelers, they went on at the end of the game, a 10-play, 75-yard drive ending with a 4-yard touchdown pass, of course, from Roethlisberger to Brown. The extension catch, as we know, that happened with 9 seconds left in the game. Come up to this year, same place, same city, same opponent, December 10th against the Steelers. 10 plays, 55 yards. With 42 seconds left, Chris Boswell nails a 46-yard field goal to give the Steelers the lead. The Ravens couldn't come back. And then last night, an 11-play, 90-yard drive, the longest drive of them all, with a 49-yard touchdown pass from Andy Dalton to Tyler Boyd with 44 seconds left. Just 2 more seconds left than what the Ravens had just 3 weeks ago in Pittsburgh. I know that the Ravens lost 2 Hall of Fame players in Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. I know that C.J. Mosley and Eric Weddle aren't those Hall of Fame caliber players, but when is enough enough? Honestly, when is enough enough? If you watched that play last night, Mosley blew the coverage. Eric Weddle was nowhere to be found, except when he was chasing down Tyler Boyd at the end of the play with Maurice Kennedy and Brandon Carr. And give credit to... C.J. Mosley is a fine football player. He's, since the Ravens won the Super Bowl, probably their best draft pick as of now. Eric Weddle's been a great free agent signing. He is making the Pro Bowl this year again, the 5th time in his career. But the fact of the matter is, the Ravens have a very good group of players. They do not have game-changing players. And I think that final drive last night was the prime example of that. And there's the way that the Ravens are structurally building their team. I've been hearing this all day on the radio. I've been hearing it all day on Twitter. But it's true. They mainly, since they've won the Super Bowl, they've drafted 24 players to their defense and 22 players to their offense. They brought in free agents, you look at Weddle, you can look at Steve Smith, you can look at Mike Wallace. They've brought guys in who have done things, but none of the guys that they've brought in are truly game-changing players that constantly affect games, players that you can count on in the clutch, keywords there. But the way the Ravens are building their team, it seems every year, and I know the Flacco contract, I don't fault the Ravens for paying Flacco. I never have. They had a Super Bowl winning quarterback who went on a historic run in the playoffs. When you have a quarterback that does that in today's NFL, you have a franchise quarterback, you pay him. Did they pay him too much money, perhaps? Maybe. But if you had offered him a lower deal, maybe he rejected it and went somewhere else. I don't know. I'm saying I haven't faulted them for the Flacco signing. What I will fault them for is all of the misses that they've made in the draft. And just focusing on the draft here, their past 5 drafts, 3 out of 5 drafts, they've drafted more defense than offense. 2013, 6 defense, 4 offense. 2014, 4 defense, 5 offense. 2015, 6 offense, 3 defense. 2016, 5 offense, 6 defense. And this year, 5 defense and 2 offense, which is the most lopsided of them all. And if the 2017 draft doesn't speak to the Ravens' struggles, I don't know what will. There have been a handful of busts since the Ravens, really dating back to 2010. You could look at Sergio Kindle, Courtney Upshaw didn't really have a big role with the Ravens. But dating back to 2013, key busts, you go to Matt Elam, a first-round pick, Arthur Brown, a second-round pick, Timmy Jernigan, a second-round pick in 2014, is not with us anymore. Neither is Terrence Brooks, a third-round pick. Lorenzo Taliaferro is not with the team anymore. Karaka Gilmore is always injured, a third-round pick. Brent Urban's always injured, as is Michael Campanaro. That's a 2014 draft. 2015, you got Brashad Perryman, you got Max Williams, you got Darren Waller. I'm calling all of them bust as of now. 2016, Correa's been a bust. Kafusi's been a bust. Kenneth Dixon's been a bust. Tavon Young and Alex Lewis were both injured this season. And then this year, there was a lot of talk in the offseason about the Ravens changing their offseason mentality instead of loading on defense and trying, as everybody's been saying this week, rebuild the 2000 Ravens defense. They took 5 defensive players this year, and I know that the defense has ultimately let them down in the end, but the Ravens had, at the end of the game, 2 healthy receivers. One was a practice squad call-up who was playing in his first NFL game. That shouldn't happen with a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And going back to the 2017 draft real quick, Ty Spouser, minimal impact this season. Chris Wormley and Tim Williams, no impact this season at all. They didn't draft any playmakers, and the two offensive players they did draft, Nico Siragusa tore whatever in the training camp, out for the season. I think it was his ACL. And then Jermaine Illuminor is a long-term project who struggled mightily in his playing time this year. Chuck Clark is a nice little piece in the 6th round. He didn't really play a lot. We'll see what he brings next year, possibly. Marlon Humphrey's been a bright spot, but it's been more bad than good in the recent drafts. And going back to my point about yesterday with having 2 healthy receivers, I mean, they're not helping Flacco. 2 healthy receivers at the end of the game. Your best tight end is a 36-year-old who's coming off a torn Achilles. And God bless Ben Watson for all he does off the field. And God bless Alex Collins for being a godsend this year. But the Alex Collins signing was never supposed to happen. I mean, they picked him up basically at the beginning of the season, the regular season, not just the preseason training camp. They picked him up in the regular season off Seattle's practice squad. I mean, this stuff just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I mean, New England's an exception, but typically in the NFL, you surround your franchise quarterback with playmakers, and the Ravens have refused to do that. I heard a great analogy. The Ravens, winning lottery tickets and spending them on their defense and then going to the dollar store for their offense, and that's exactly what's been going on since they've won the Super Bowl. They had one exception in 2014 with Gary Kubiak, with Joe Flacco having his best season, ever, with Steve Smith, Torrey Smith, Justin Forsett, Owen Daniels, and a lot of those players weren't expensive either. I think it was kind of a mirage of Kubiak being so good. But again, come crunch time in New England, the Ravens, their offense put up 35 points, two separate 14-point leads, and the defense blew it. There is a constant struggle with the Ravens, a constant theme, and it's the same every year. It's the chip change offense that struggles mightily early in the season, picks it up, in the second half of the season. Granted, they'll still have terrible stretches like they did in the Cincinnati game yesterday, and then load everything into a defense that chokes consistently in crunch time. I don't like the word choke, but that's exactly what happened last night. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the Ravens respond. I mean, I asked the question, what happened to this franchise? 5 years ago, the Ravens had just won the Super Bowl, and we were celebrating down in Baltimore on Utah Street and around, holding up the Lombardi Trophy. And now we've been through several bad drafts, one playoff appearance in 5 years. There have been several bad contracts handed out, whether it was to Dennis Pitta, who the Ravens knew had a hip problem, whether it was Jeremy Maclin, whether it was Danny Woodhead, Michael Huff, Eugene Monroe, Kendrick Lewis, just so many bad contracts. I'm not calling Flacco's one a bad one, but let's look at this year's free agent signings, the contributions that the Ravens were counting on this year, aside from all the draft issues they've had. Jeremy Maclin, at the time, I thought they needed to sign him, and I still think they made the right move in doing that, because at the end of the game, they had 2 healthy receivers. One of them wasn't even Maclin, but anyway, Macklin's under a 2-year, $11 million contract right now. He racked up 40 receptions for 440 yards and 3 touchdowns, his worst season of his career. Brandon Carr, 4 years, $23.5 million. Absolute garbage after Jimmy Smith's injury. Yes, he's a great number 2 cornerback. Yes, he stays healthy, which is what the Ravens need in their secondary. But again, without Jimmy Smith, he's no better than what the Ravens have had in the past when they've had this issue. Tony Jefferson, who's under a 4-year, $34 million contract, before the season was thought to be a huge blockbuster acquisition for the Ravens. It was supposed to be a game changer. I don't even know if I remember him making 5 plays this year. I can remember him making tackles catching up to people, but that's about it. Danny Woodhead might be the worst of them all. 3 years, $8.8 million. He played in 8 games, 56 rush yards on 14 carries, and 33 receptions for 200 yards. No touchdowns whatsoever. The guy's got no burst left. His legs are done. He's had an ACL and a hamstring the past 2 years. He's over the age of 30. I don't know what the hell the Ravens were thinking that made that seem like a good move, but 5 years ago, yeah. Now, I don't know. This is going to be an interesting offseason. there's just a lot of anger out of Ravens fans. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of sadness to see what the franchise has reduced itself to over the past few years. But the empty seats, I know the protests have been a big factor. They are a much bigger factor than I originally believed. But a big reason why a lot of fans aren't showing up is the product on the field. And the Ravens should honestly feel ashamed of themselves for basically begging for fan support 2 weeks ago before the Colts game, and then playing mediocre football against a 3-12 team, and then following that up with the loss at home to a Bengals team to eliminate themselves in the playoffs. They did it to themselves, and they should be ashamed and embarrassed. And I hope they are, and I hope they're pissed off. And that's where we're all at. We are a frustrated bunch, and being a Baltimore sports fan right now in general is just, it's not a fun time. The Ravens are going through this, everything that I just alluded to. The, Maryland basketball, the Terps are in the midst of an injury-riddled season that already looks to be on the decline, despite, where we are in the season. And then there's the Orioles, who, that is a whole other can of worms. That, this might be one of the darkest times to be a Baltimore sports fan right now. January 1st, 2018 is a dark, dark day in Baltimore, and I'm not saying that lightly. It's the truth. It's the truth. And it's hard to imagine things getting better in the immediate future. They certainly won't be for the Orioles. But for the Ravens, this is a crucial, crucial time. They have angry fans who aren't showing up to games that needs to be addressed. The fan base is not what it used to be. They've got a coaching staff that's missed the playoffs 4 out of 5 seasons. They're going to need to replace a defensive coordinator. I'm assuming they're going to need to replace their offensive coordinator. I can't see any reason why they would, have him back, but I said the same thing last season and he was back. And it's hard to imagine the Ravens staying the course again and making the fans buy in with the same coaching staff. And who knows, maybe they'll keep Harbaugh. But if they do, they got to change their approach. They can't be going to the dollar store for offensive weapons anymore. They got to get some actual playmakers. Give me some players that make me want to spend money on a jersey and wear it to a game. I didn't want to buy a Jeremy Maclin jersey and wear it to a game. I love Alex Collins, but I don't know if he's even going to be here next year. I'm not buying a Nick Boyle or a Max Williams or Benjamin Watson jersey. I'm not doing it. Do they even sell those? Are they even a thing? The approach needs to change. There needs to be actual playmakers, whether it's a running back, whether it's a tight end, whether it's a wide receiver. They need it all. And then on defense, I don't know what more you can do. They've poured all their resources into the defense, and it's still choking. Maybe a new scheme is necessary. Maybe, they'll get some players back, whether it was injury this year, and, Jimmy Smith will come back, but we haven't been able to rely on him to be healthy. But there is a lot that needs to be done, and I can't say... I don't know what my opinion is about the whole coaching situation because I don't know what they're going to do. I tweeted this out the other day, but popcorn will be a necessity for the State of the Ravens press conference, and that's typically right after they're done playing football, so that could very well be coming up here in a couple of days. I know the Ravens had locker cleanout today. I know there were players addressing the media, but it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks in Owings Mills, and I don't think anybody's safe. I don't think anybody should be safe missing the playoffs 4 out of 5 seasons. I've talked a lot about the coaching staff, but there could also be some changes coming in the front office. There have been, rumors kind of starting to swirl about whether or not Ozzie Newsome's going to stick around anymore. And if he leaves, that's a whole other story to dive into of, do they stay the course with the same staff they've had before and just give the keys to Eric DeCosta, who's stayed in Baltimore despite getting several job offers? If Ozzie goes, is he the next general manager, or are the Ravens going to look to clean house completely? I have no idea. They finished with a winning record. I'm sure that's going to be a something they're going to bring up this week, that they did still finish with the winning record. But the fact of the matter is, they're not in the playoffs again. And really, they made no progress. Aside from winning one other game, they made no progress. The needle did not move at all from last season. They have the exact same draft spot that they did before. They had a winning record, but they're right in the middle of the pack record-wise. And this year, it feels like a complete waste. Because now, they're in the middle of the first round, and they're not in the playoffs. The exact scenario that we didn't want to have happen. That's all you really need to say. That's all I really can say. If you're listening to this podcast, I hope that your day so far, the start to your day, was certainly better than your New Year's Eve. I know that there are a lot of upset, angry people in Ravens Nation right now, in the Ravens flock, and you deserve to be. We've been let down, and it's about as simple as that. Again, thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, an unscripted version coming to you through either iTunes or SoundCloud. Please subscribe. Give me that 5-star review and hit me up on Twitter at JMcDonnell95 or CharmCityBW for our website's handle, and check us out at CharmCityBirdwatch.com. We've got a lot of content coming up the next few days. I certainly want to hit up Nolan and Vasilios and Tyler, all the guys here. And I also want to have I know I have Keith Mills, who has agreed to come on the podcast. I'm still working out the logistics of time for that, but that will be coming soon. We will be bringing you our playoff predictions this week like we did last year. It'll be a post, and it'll kind of just break each game down with insight from all experts and 100 words or less. So just be on the lookout for that. So until next time, I'm Jake McDonnell for Charm City Birdwatch. And hopefully we see something happen that alters the course of the Ravens franchise in the next few days, because, as if the past 5 years were any indication, the current direction that they're heading in now is not working.